Hello and welcome. My name is Omer Atilla Ergi. I'm an academic. I teach Islamic theology at a university. And today I will be presenting on the topic of is the story of Adam alayhi salam narrated by the Qur'an metaphorical. Now, the main reason why I decided to do this presentation is I have read articles from Muslim academics and comments of Imam who argue that verses about Adam could be mutashabihat, which means metaphoric, symbolic, and basically this is what the argument is. The story of Adam in the Quran could be metaphorical and should be reinterpreted, and one can still remain faithful to the Quranic narrative by accepting the theory of human evolution. The verses about Adam are actually talking about the symbolic creation of human beings, not a particular individual. And like Isa alayhi salam, Adam alayhi salam may have been fashioned in a mother's womb. It can still be argued that he was the first modern human being coming from the genus Homo. So this is what the argument is basically. Now it is evident that the theory of evolution is the main reason behind this claim. And the assumption is that the evolution theory equates science. Now, I will be challenging this argument on the basis of Ahl Sunnat wal Jamaat Aqidah, creed, and also the fact that there are many scientists out there, molecular biologists, biochemists, physicists, philosophers, mathematicians, who actually, argue against the theory of evolution based on scientific grounds. But first, let us briefly have a look at the Quranic narrative about Adam alayhi salam. And you will see that there are many verses there, and there are more, that the creation of Adam alayhi salam in the Quran explained in quite detail, and I have highlighted some of the verses there, as you can see in red. And it says sounding clay, created from sounding clay. And another verse there, clay like that of pottery, similar to pottery. And there is a very interesting inference here as well. So let him not get you both out of paradise. And this indicates that both Adam alayhi salam and Hawa was in paradise before they were brought down to earth. And there's another verse there, O ye children of Adam, human beings, let not Satan seduce you in the same manner as he got your parents out of paradise. As I said, there are many other verses, similar to this, and also there are many hadith about this, and there is a consensus by the Islamic theologians and scholars, 1,400 years of scholarship, and they have a consensus on the fact that Adam alayhi salam was created from clay in Jannah. He was placed in paradise, and then he was taken out of paradise and placed on earth. Now, before we go on, there are some important principles that should be considered before theological interpretations. For example, scientific theories can be dismissed, amended, or modified with new discoveries. History is the best evidence for this. An example is the dismissal of the steady-state universe theory. Another thing is what will happen to the apologists when scientists in the future, if and when scientists in the future dismiss the theory of evolution altogether. What will their response be to the many Muslims that they may have influenced? We have to also remember that scientists are also human beings, and therefore they can be influenced by ideological, political, philosophical, or theological concepts. There is nothing wrong with questioning the validity of the theory of evolution, as there are scientists who challenge the theory on scientific grounds, as we mentioned before. There is another very interesting thing in the world of academia, and that is the dogmatism of evolutionary scientists. There is no doubt that the theory of evolution is a good scientific explanation to the origin of species if the elements of design and complexity are not taken into account. The evolution theory, which is based on probabilities, yet its supporters dismiss alternative theories as nonsense, even without exploring the possibility that they may in fact be valid arguments. So any argument put forward against the evolution theory, even if it's based on scientific grounds, it is dismissed automatically and immediately. And the thing that comes to my mind, why is it that in the world of academia you can challenge, repudiate, or propose an alternative theory to any scientific theory except the theory of evolution? Why is it considered as taboo to criticize the theory of evolution? It is unacademic to argue that the theory of evolution has no gaps or flaws and that no alternative theories are available. I think this is very important before we come up with arguments that the Qur'an should be reinterpreted so it can be compatible to the theory of evolution. Now, what is the apparent clash between religion and the theory of evolution? When Charles Darwin first introduced the theory of evolution, it was based on a hypothesis that tried to explain the diversity of species on Earth. So why are there so many different species on Earth? In fact, these days, according to research, there are more than 8 million different species on Earth. The modern synthetic theory also tries to explain the origin of life through the concept of probability, randomness. So what are the arguments from theological perspective? Religious scriptures assert that life is a product of creation, not chance. The Creator is all-knowing and all-powerful, therefore there is no room for randomness in nature. The Creator does not experiment with nature or life. Adam is the ancestor of human beings, therefore human species did not evolve from primates. And this is the arguments from the theological religious perspective. There are, as I mentioned before, biochemical challenges to modern synthetic theory. And let us take a look at some of them, but first a very basic lesson in biology. Now, all living entities are made up of proteins, which means no proteins, no living organisms. Protein chains are formed by amino acids. These are all organic compounds. In order to form the chain, amino acids are held together by a chemical bond called the peptide bonds. Now here's the dilemma. Proteins are product of living entities, not the other way around. So how did they form in the prebiotic earth and gradually produce life? Now the modern synthetic theory says by chance. So let us look at this probability, this probability of chance occurring. Scientists and mathematicians explore the probability of a protein chain containing, for example, 150 amino acids joined by peptide bonds forming by chance. Stephen Meyer, a scientist, argues that the probability of getting a properly folded chain of 150 one-handed amino acids joined by peptide bonds is 1 in 10 to the power of 74 plus 45 plus 45, or 1 in 10 to the power of 164, which means 164 zeros after the 10. It means the formation of a protein chain by chance is at impossible odds. Why? Considering that there are 10 to the power of atoms in the entire universe. Estimated mass of the universe is 10 to the power of 52. Number of stars in the universe is 10 to the power of 22. Then, how logical is it to argue that from the millions of interactions in the ocean, a protein chain that also includes the formation of peptide bonds may be formed by chance and survived, as it also requires a membrane to survive in water? Counter-argument by the evolutionists. The abiogenesis theory suggests that the first living things were much simpler, not even protobacteria. Probably simple molecules, about 40 subunits. Thus, the probability of formation by chance is much higher than what design scholars suggest. So this is the counter-argument. Moreover, the formation of biological polymers from monomers is not random. it occurs decidedly through the laws of chemistry and biochemistry. Now, the response to this is, there is no evidence of these 40 subunit living things existing in the prebiotic Earth. So this is an assumption. Moreover, I think this is more important, proteins are not living things. They are a product of living things. Mathematically, the probability of formation of 40 subunits is still too high anyway. With peptide bond formation, it is more than the number of atoms in the universe. Again, it's a huge number. If monomer to polymer formation is not random, as argued, but occurs decidedly, the question is, this is a philosophical question, who or what decides it? Laws do not establish themselves, so what is the origin of these laws? There are also biological and philosophical problems with the modern synthetic theory as well. It is important to note first that there is no generally accepted theory for the origin of life, because they are two different things. The theory of evolution in regards to the origin of species proposed by Darwin is a different thing. However, origin of life is a different theory. Abiogenesis theory argues that life may have arisen from non-living matter. This is the abiogenesis theory. It proposes a theoretical explanation to how this may have occurred, but there is no experimental data to prove it. Biogenesis argument, on the other hand, infers that life can only come from life. This argument is proven by experimentation. The difficulty of explaining how life could have arisen through chance have led some evolutionary scientists to argue that amino acids may have come from space. This, of course, does not solve the question of how life originated in the first place. If amino acids came to Earth on some meteorite, how did they form the first protein chain with peptide bonds? And how did the first protein chain survive without a membrane? These are questions that need to be answered as well. But there is an even more important question than just calculating probabilities. No scientists have ever demonstrated in a lab that abiogenesis can occur. This means there is no experimental data showing us that life can emerge from non-living matter. So what is life, and what gives life to non-living matter? Amino acids and proteins are the building blocks of life, but they are not living organisms. So where does life come from? There is an amazing amount of genetic information in the DNA. So what is the origin of this information? We do not see this kind of information in non-living matter. So where did this come from? Where did the information originate from? It's very important to ask, have any scientists demonstrated in a lab that a living single-celled organism can be produced by simulating abiogenesis? Or maybe a more philosophical question, can you give someone something that you never possessed in the first place? We know that living organisms possess such qualities that we do not see in non-living organisms. If they do not possess these qualities, how could they give living organisms something that they never possessed in the first place? And this is a philosophical argument. All of these arguments in a way prove that the theory of evolution is not absolute and that it can indeed be challenged on scientific grounds. Now let us briefly look at human evolution. Evidence for human evolution is based on two things. One is fossil records, the other one DNA comparisons. Now you can see that the tree of evolution there on your screen, and when we look at human evolution from primates to modern human beings, the timeline is about 6 million years. So what is human evolution? Humans are considered to share common ancestry with primates simply because of the structural resemblance and DNA comparisons. So the structural resemblance, observed in fossils and DNA comparisons. Fossil records suggest that primate to human evolution commenced about 6 to 7 million years ago. Basically from a family of primates to genus Homo erectus, then to Homo sapiens, then to modern humans. Chimpanzees are regarded as our closest relatives, as it is believed that their DNA is 97% or 98% similar to human DNA. Although there are scientists who argue that this estimation is inaccurate, as in some aspects the similarity is about 95%. So the question is, if common ancestry is based solely on DNA comparisons, then it is also important to note that mouse DNA, for example, is 92% similar to human DNA, and the Abyssinian domestic cat DNA is about 90% similar to human DNA. So what is the challenge to human evolution put forward by scientists? According to Casey Luskin, evidence suggests that the genetic differences between chimps and humans could not arise by standard evolutionary mechanisms, as even the 2% difference equates to 35 million base pair differences. This is very interesting. So in a genetic level, there's a huge difference there. 2% is enormous. This means that even if two of these specific genetic differences were required for a functional advantage, a period of 200 million years is needed. Molecular biologist Michael Behe's critics Rick Durant and Dina Smith tried to refute Behe's estimation of 200 million years and came up with a calculation that required 100 million years. This is the calculation done by evolutionary scientists. This being the case, how could Homo erectus to human evolution occur within 6 million years when there are millions of genetic differences between apes and human beings? The probabilities leave evolutionists baffled, and with only one argument, which suggests the structural resemblance is enough of an evidence. The response to this claim by design scholars is, does structural resemblance indicate common ancestry, or does it indicate common designer? A philosophical argument. As you can see at the bottom of your screen there, some fossils, skull fossils of various creatures. The first one on the left there is the famous Lucy skull, estimated to be 3.2 million years old. And then you have Homo erectus, about 1.4 million years old. And then you have a skull of a chimp, modern day chimp. And then on the far right, you see the human skull. Yes, there are resemblances, but does resemblance indicate the common ancestor, or does it indicate common designer? In fact, if you look at the illustration on the far left there of Lucy, it resembles a monkey. And you can see the skeleton of Lucy compared to a human being that's a 5-year-old child. Now we go back to the response to the argument that the story of Adam is metaphorical. There are too many verses in the Qur'an clearly stating that Adam was not created on earth. There are also two theological problems with the argument that God creates through evolution. Now, this argument is put forward by few Muslims, but in general, a lot of Christian scholars also put forward this argument, giving into the evolutionary theory. So, what are those two theological problems? If God is creating new species through the evolutionary process, then God is experimenting with nature to see what the end product will be. This negates God's attribute of ilm in Islamic theology, which is knowledge, and hence the name of all-knowing, alim, because God knows everything even before they are created. If God knows, if the argument is this, yes, God knows what the end product will be, then there is no natural selection, randomness, chance, or accidents anyway. Then, in this situation, why accept the theory as it is suggested by the evolutionists? Now, finally, my advice to those who propose that Adam is metaphorical, because I believe people who propose this are maybe in the fashion of neo-Mutazilites, but Ahl Sunnat wal Jamaat doctrines, creed, would challenge this. So my advice to these people who propose this: the theory of evolution is not absolute, so do not try to reinterpret the Qur'an so that it is compatible to human evolution. 2, revise your understanding of the names and attributes of God in Islam, Islamic theology. All literature on Islamic Aqidah creed asserts that God is Al-Alim. Therefore, he knew the specifics of all species prior to their creation. Furthermore, he is Al-Qadir, meaning that he can create what he wills without the aid of a process which functions randomly, functions on probabilities. Thank you all for listening, and that brings me to end of my presentation.